Hey, Andrew Pierce here, Blueprint Therapy Solutions, CEO, Chief Cook and Bottle Washer. We're located in Woodbury, Minnesota. And today I want to talk about consciousness and I guess how it relates to psychology. It's a pretty big topic, so I just want to talk about consciousness first. Maybe I'll make this a series. You can let me know what you think. But a lot of times, people look at consciousness as being some sort of ethereal, non-scientific aspect of, psychology, I guess. And interestingly enough, there's actually quite a bit of hard science behind consciousness. It's a little bit difficult to put your finger on, but the beginning of understanding is usually the definition of terms. And so when I talk about consciousness, I think about three characteristics of it, right? Number one, it's immaterial, right? It's not comprised of subatomic particles, right? It's immaterial. It's like more like a wave or a field, like an electromagnetic field. It's immaterial, so it can't be destroyed. Number two is that it has a perceptual vantage point. In other words, consciousness, like if I were to use the term I in my consciousness, what I really would have to mean is it's not everything else. It's the only thing that isn't everything else. It's a specific perceptual vantage point. And then the third aspect, I suppose, would be continuity, memory and things like that. And so if we can agree on those general terms, I think it really makes it a lot easier to discuss consciousness. It's kind of like the reason why it's valuable is I think from a psychology standpoint, there are a lot of different reasons for it. But I think one of the useful assumptions to make is that consciousness, if I'm right about it's being immaterial and indestructible and a perceptual vantage point, I would say that it's fair to say that that's our most fundamental state of being, if you will. Eastern philosophers have long talked about the used consciousness to develop an understanding of themselves and of the world and of people in general. And if we go with the singular perceptual vantage point, that's not everything else, energy and indestructible, it's easy to buy into that being our most fundamental state of being. And so what happens, if we can at least go with that assumption that consciousness is pretty much how I described in very unscientific terms, when we're born, right, when we're now occupying this form where we pop out of our mom, poof, there, we're a baby. Now we're basically in this earth suit, right? And it's a very limiting state of being. It's a limiting form. It's a limiting vehicle, right? All we have now in this form, in this three-dimensional state of being, is our five senses, and we only see within a fairly limited spectrum of wavelength. We only hear within a fairly limited spectrum of auditory wavelength. From a feeling standpoint, if we get too hot, we die. If we get too cold, we die. Taste, again, is a function of our neural connections and throughout our body, our nervous system, and so on. And so that would be our fundamental when we're born, right? That would be our into I guess for convenience sake, we could call this our earth suit. A lot of times we forget, I think, if we buy into this fundamental state of being as consciousness, that this is an Earth suit. It's not us. It's not who we are. You know, we consist of a bunch of organized subatomic particles, but that's not us. Nonetheless, here we are, and a lot of people, I think, tend to forget, fail to distinguish between their Earth suit and all the subjective experiences the range of subjective experiences that it allows us to have while we're stuck in this Earth suit. So we're born, and pretty soon this is where the pathology starts, is the environment, right? We start getting impacted by our environment, and this is from a mental health standpoint, right? Because I'm a psychologist. We usually have dysfunctional, a lot of people have dysfunctional families or even functional families, but there's this tendency, there's this conflict between authenticity, right, our truest state of being in the absence of any outside influences on one hand, which is an important instinct. It gives us our unique identity. And then this strong instinctive need for attachment as human beings. There's a strong instinctual need for attachment to our parents, our caregivers, between the infant and the mother or the parents, and vice versa. And when we are born into a family situation where there's the sense that we're not acceptable, or our parents are have anger issues or addiction issues, or are super judgmental, we get this impression that we're not good enough, and we repress our true selves in favor of that attachment, because without that attachment we would literally die, especially as infants. We're the most helpless for the longest period of time of any creature on the planet. So as a result of repressing our true self in favor of attachment, we start developing neuroses, right? Anxiety, depression, mental health issues, OCD, other issues, to cope with the dysfunction of our family of origin. Usually, again, those thinking patterns can be unlearned and fixed in a suitable mental health setting. And for some people, they develop another layer of pathology then, in addition to their mental health coping survival mechanisms of addiction, in order to deal with the discomfort of their mental health issues, right? So we've got all these different layers of the base layer is consciousness, our most pure form of our true self. There's the form that we're born into, and then after that the environment kind of takes over, and we have struggles relating to the environment. So I think that the goal of mental health recovery and is to work through that pathology back to a more fundamental form. And Eastern philosophers have known this for a long time, and this is what mindfulness psychology is about: developing a degree of separation, if you will, between our earth suit frame of reference and our consciousness frame of reference, creating a degree of separation so that we can become the conscious observer of our thoughts, our dysfunctional pathological thought patterns, so that we can then identify which ones are serving us and which ones are not. And that puts us in a much mentally healthier position to deal with life on life's terms. And it also, I think, makes us a safer person to love, because we're no longer a moving target. We restore our authenticity, so we're no longer a chameleon adapting to our environmental factors, which makes us a much safer person to love. And that love, I think, if you're lucky enough to experience it, true love with somebody who loves you, your authentic self, and they are authentic, that's the closest thing to restoring us to what probably is what being in a pure state of consciousness feels like. And that's everything I know about that. I gotta go. Andrew Pierce, Blueprint Therapy Solutions, 651-424-1967, or blueprinttherapysolutions.com. Have a great day.